Hey there, history enthusiasts and curious minds alike. Tonight, we're about to embark on a journey through time, venturing back to an era that has captivated imaginations for centuries. We're stepping into the medieval world, a realm of towering castles, secluded cloisters, and sprawling countrysides that seem to stretch endlessly into the horizon. But our focus tonight isn't on the grand battles or the legendary kings that often dominate our understanding of this period. Instead, we're turning our attention to something far more subtle, yet profoundly influential. We're delving into a legal measure that, at first glance, might seem like nothing more than a footnote in the annals of history. I'm talking about the Statute of Mortmain. Now, I know what you're thinking. Mortmain? That doesn't sound very exciting. But trust me, this seemingly obscure piece of legislation had far-reaching consequences that shaped the very fabric of medieval society. It's a tale of power, land, and the delicate balance between church and state that would echo through the centuries. Imagine, if you will, a world where the church's influence extended far beyond matters of faith. A world where vast tracts of land-prime agricultural estates, bustling towns, and everything in between were under ecclesiastical control. This was the reality of medieval Europe, where the church's temporal power rivaled, and sometimes even surpassed, that of the nobility. The Statute of Mortmain, enacted in the late 13th century, was a calculated move to curb this ever-growing ecclesiastical might. But why was it necessary? What prompted the crown to take such a bold step? To understand this, we need to peel back the layers of medieval society. Picture a feudal system where land wasn't just a commodity, it was the very foundation of power and wealth. Lords derived their strength from their estates, collecting taxes and raising armies from their tenants. But there was a catch. When a noble died, the crown could claim certain rights over the inherited land, including taxes and the ability to sell wardships. The church, however, played by different rules. As an institution that never died, land gifted to the church effectively became locked away, removed from the cycle of death, inheritance, and royal prerogative that kept the feudal system ticking. This land was said to fall into the dead hand, or mortmain of the church, hence the name of our statute. As you can imagine, this didn't sit well with the crown. With each passing generation, more and more land slipped from its grasp, diminishing royal revenues and influence. The Statute of Mortmain was the monarchy's answer to this creeping erosion of power. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. The implementation of this statute wasn't a simple matter of royal decree. It was a delicate dance of politics, a careful negotiation between competing interests that would shape the landscape, both literal and figurative, of medieval England. Consider the implications for the common folk, the peasants who worked the land. How did this legal change affect their daily lives? Did it alter the balance of power between their earthly and spiritual lords? These are the questions we'll be exploring as we delve deeper into the impact of the Statute of Mortmain. And what of the church itself? How did it respond to this challenge to its growing temporal power? The reaction from monasteries, cathedrals, and parish churches across the land varied, painting a complex picture of resistance, adaptation, and negotiation. As we unravel this historical tapestry, we'll see how a single legal document could send ripples to every level of society. From the highest towers of cathedrals to the humblest village churches, from noble manors to peasant hovels, the Statute of Mortmain left its mark. But the story doesn't end in the medieval period. The echoes of this statute would resonate through the centuries, influencing property law, church-state relations, and even the very concept of charitable giving well into the modern era. It's a testament to the enduring impact of medieval legislation on our world today. So as we journey back to this world of castles and cloisters, keep your eyes open for the subtle shifts in power, the quiet changes that often go unnoticed in the grand narratives of history. For it's in these small details These seemingly minor legal adjustments that we often find the true drivers of historical change. The Statute of Mortmain may not have the same ring to it as the Magna Carta or the Doomsday Book, but its influence was no less profound. It reshaped the relationship between church and state, altered the distribution of land, and set in motion changes that would be felt for generations to come. As we delve into the intricacies of this fascinating piece of legislation, we'll uncover stories of clever lawyers finding loopholes, of desperate nobles seeking to secure their legacies, and of church officials fighting to maintain their influence. We'll see how a single statute could become a battleground for the competing interests that defined medieval society. But more than that, we'll gain a deeper appreciation for the complexity of the medieval world. Far from the simple, backward society it's often portrayed as, we'll discover a world of subtle legal maneuverings, of careful political calculations, and of profound social changes that continue to shape our world today. So settle in and prepare to be transported back to a time of stone fortresses and soaring cathedrals, of powerful lords and industrious peasants. But keep your wits about you, for in the world of the Statute of Mortmain, things are not always as they seem. The true power often lies not in the clash of swords, but in the quiet scratching of a quill on parchment. As we explore this fascinating chapter of history, we'll see how a seemingly dry legal document could become a catalyst for change, reshaping the very foundations of medieval society. We'll witness the unintended consequences of well-intentioned legislation and the ways in which different groups, from kings to commoners, adapted to this new legal reality. The Statute of Mortmain is more than just a historical curiosity. It's a window into the complex interplay of power, faith, and law that defined the medieval world. Through its story, we can gain insights into the forces that shaped our own society, and perhaps even glimpse the echoes of these ancient struggles in our modern world. So join me as we unravel the mysteries of the Statute of Mortmain and discover how a single legal change could reshape the medieval landscape in ways that would be felt for centuries to come. It's a journey that will challenge our preconceptions, expand our understanding, and perhaps even change the way we view our own relationship with law, land, and legacy. As we conclude our exploration of the Statute of Mortmain, take a moment to reflect on the enduring power of legal frameworks to shape societies. From the medieval period to the present day, the laws we create and the ways we interpret them continue to mold our world in both obvious and subtle ways. The story of the Statute of Mortmain reminds us that history is not just a series of grand events and larger-than-life figures. It's also made up of countless small changes, quiet revolutions that unfold over generations. As we return to our own time, let's carry with us a newfound appreciation for the complex tapestry of the past and the myriad ways it continues to influence our present. We begin in the 13th century, when the landscape of medieval England was dotted with imposing stone structures, cathedrals, abbeys, and monasteries. Within these hallowed walls, monks chanted their daily prayers, and scribes bent over parchment, their quills scratching in the flickering candlelight. But beyond these visible signs of piety, a quieter, more profound transformation was taking place. The church, already a spiritual powerhouse, was steadily amassing vast tracts of land. As nobles sought to secure their place in the afterlife, they bequeathed estates to religious institutions. Acre by acre, field by field, the church's earthly holdings grew. This gradual accumulation of wealth and property would soon draw the attention of the crown, setting the stage for a conflict that would reshape the balance of power in medieval England. In the bustling markets and busy ports, whispers began to circulate. Merchants and craftsmen, their purses growing heavier with the fruits of a burgeoning economy, cast wary glances at the expanding influence of the church. They saw their own opportunities for land ownership dwindling as more and more property fell into ecclesiastical hands. The nobility, too, began to feel the pinch. As their ancestral lands were gifted away by pious relatives, they watched their own power base erode. The intricate web of feudal obligations that bound society together was starting to fray at the edges, threatening the very fabric of medieval life. In the royal court, advisors huddled around maps, their fingers tracing the ever-growing patches of church-owned land. They whispered concerns into the king's ear, concerns about diminishing royal revenues, about the challenge to secular authority, about the potential for a kingdom within a kingdom. Meanwhile, in the countryside, peasants toiled on fields that increasingly belonged to distant abbots rather than local lords. The change in ownership often meant little to their daily lives, but it signaled a shift in the foundations of feudal society. The land, always the source of wealth and power, was slowly but surely concentrating in the hands of an institution that answered to Rome as much as it did to the English crown. As the 13th century wore on, this quiet accumulation of land by the church began to reach a critical mass. In manor houses and castles across the realm, nobles gathered to discuss their grievances. They spoke of lost inheritances, of dwindling influence, of the need to check the growing power of the clergy. In London, royal scribes began drafting documents, their quills scratching out the legal language that would eventually become the Statute of Mortmain. This was to be the crown's answer to the church's expanding temporal power, a legal barrier to stem the tide of land flowing into ecclesiastical coffers. The statute, when it finally emerged, was a masterpiece of medieval statecraft. It did not directly challenge the church's right to own land, but instead focused on the process of land transfer. No longer could a dying noble simply will away his estates to a monastery or abbey. Now, royal permission would be required for such transfers, a subtle but powerful check on the church's ability to acquire new holdings. As news of the statute spread, it sent ripples through every level of society. In monastery scriptoriums, monks paused in their copying to discuss the implications. Would this mean an end to the steady stream of donated lands that had sustained their orders for generations? How would they adapt to this new reality? In baronial halls, there was a sense of cautious optimism. Here, at last, was a tool to preserve family lands and maintain the delicate balance of feudal power. Yet even as they celebrated, some wondered if this royal intervention might not set a dangerous precedent, one that could be turned against them in the future. For the common people, the Statute of Mortmain was a distant legal concept, far removed from their daily concerns of harvest and hearth. Yet even they sensed that something fundamental was shifting in the world around them. The church, that great constant in their lives, was being challenged in a way they had never seen before. As the implications of the statute began to unfold, it became clear that this was more than just a legal document. It was a declaration of royal authority, a reassertion of the crown's supremacy over all matters within the realm spiritual as well as temporal. In the years that followed, the Statute of Mortmain would be tested, challenged, and reinterpreted. It would become a cornerstone of English law, influencing property rights and church-state relations for centuries to come. But in those early days, as the ink dried on the parchment and royal messengers rode out to spread the news, few could have predicted the full extent of its impact. The quiet accumulation of land by the church had finally met its match in the form of royal legislation. The balance of power in medieval England was shifting, and with it, the very foundations of feudal society. As the sun set on the 13th century, England stood on the brink of a new era, one where the crown would assert its authority more forcefully than ever before, forever changing the relationship between secular and ecclesiastical power. In the cloisters and chapter houses, in the great halls of nobles, and in the humble dwellings of the common folk, the reverberations of this change would be felt for generations to come. The Statute of Mortmain had set in motion a process that would help shape the England of the future, a nation where the power of the church would be tempered by the authority of the crown, and where the delicate balance between spiritual and temporal realms would be forever altered. As night fell across the land, candles guttered in their holders, and the last prayers of the day were whispered. In the silence that followed, the weight of change hung heavy in the air. Medieval England slept, unaware that it had taken its first steps down a path that would lead to a new understanding of power, property, and the relationship between church and state. As the medieval church grew in power and influence, an unexpected legal conundrum began to take shape. The lands bestowed upon religious institutions by pious donors and wealthy patrons were intended to support the church's mission in perpetuity. However, this well-intentioned practice gave rise to a peculiar legal concept known as mortmain, a term that quite literally translates to dead hand in Old French. The notion of mortmain emerged from the unique nature of church property ownership. Unlike secular lands, which would typically change hands through inheritance or sale, church lands remained frozen in time, held forever by the ecclesiastical authorities. This permanence created a host of unforeseen complications that would vex both religious and secular authorities for centuries to come. At the heart of the mortmain issue lay the fact that these lands were effectively removed from the normal cycle of property transfer and taxation. As the church accumulated more and more land through donations and bequests, a significant portion of the kingdom's wealth became locked away beyond the reach of the crown's coffers or the noble family's estates. The implications of this dead hand grip on property were far-reaching. Feudal lords found their potential inheritances diminished as pious relatives gifted lands to the church. The crown saw its tax base erode as an ever-growing expanse of territory fell under ecclesiastical control. Even the church itself, despite benefiting from these donations, faced challenges in managing such vast and disparate holdings. As the problem of mortmain grew more acute, tensions between the church and secular authorities intensified. Kings and nobles alike began to view the church's expanding landholdings with increasing alarm. They saw not only a threat to their own power and wealth, but also a fundamental imbalance in the social and economic fabric of the realm. The legal minds of the day grappled with this thorny issue, seeking ways to reconcile the church's right to receive gifts with the need to maintain a functioning system of land ownership and taxation. It was a delicate balance, fraught with political and religious sensitivities. In response to these mounting concerns, a landmark piece of legislation was enacted, the Statute of Mortmain. This law, passed in 1279 during the reign of Edward I of England, sought to address the growing problem of church lands held in perpetuity. The Statute of Mortmain represented a bold attempt to curb the unchecked growth of church property. Its provisions were straightforward, yet revolutionary. The law prohibited the transfer of land to religious institutions without explicit royal license. This meant that any individual wishing to donate land to the church would first need to obtain permission from the crown. By introducing this requirement, the statute aimed to give the monarchy greater control over the flow of property into ecclesiastical hands. It provided a mechanism for the crown to assess the impact of such transfers on royal revenues and feudal obligations before allowing them to proceed. The implementation of the Statute of Mortmain sent shockwaves through both religious and secular circles. For the church, it represented a significant obstacle to the expansion of its temporal power. No longer could it rely on a steady stream of land donations to fuel its growth and influence. Secular authorities, on the other hand, saw the statute as a necessary safeguard against the erosion of their own power base. It offered a means to preserve the feudal system and protect the interests of noble families who stood to lose their inheritances to pious donations. Yet, like many medieval laws, the Statute of Mortmain proved challenging to enforce consistently. The Church, with its considerable influence and resources, often found ways to circumvent the restrictions. Creative legal maneuvers and the exploitation of loopholes became common as both donors and religious institutions sought to continue the practice of land transfer. Moreover, the statute's effectiveness was hampered by the complex web of jurisdictions and privileges that characterized medieval society. Different regions and institutions enjoyed varying degrees of exemption or special status, making uniform application of the law difficult. Despite these challenges, the Statute of Mortmain marked a significant turning point in the relationship between church and state. It represented one of the first major attempts by secular authorities to assert control over the church's accumulation of wealth and property. The legacy of the statute would be felt for centuries to come. It set a precedent for government intervention in religious affairs and laid the groundwork for future reforms aimed at balancing the power of ecclesiastical and secular institutions. As time passed, the problem of mortmain evolved alongside changes in society and governance. The Reformation would later bring about dramatic shifts in church-state relations, further altering the landscape of property ownership and religious influence. Yet the fundamental issues raised by mortmain questions of perpetual ownership, the balance of power between institutions, and the economic impact of land locked in dead hands would continue to resonate through the ages. Modern legal systems still grapple with similar concepts, albeit in different forms and contexts. The story of mortmain and the statute that sought to address it serves as a fascinating window into the complex interplay of law, religion, and politics in medieval society. It reminds us that the challenges of balancing competing interests and managing resources are not unique to our time, but have deep roots in the historical development of legal and social structures. As we reflect on this chapter of history, we are reminded of the enduring nature of certain fundamental questions. How do we reconcile individual rights with collective needs? How do we balance the power of institutions against the interests of the state? And how do we ensure that the dead hand of the past does not unduly constrain the possibilities of the future? These questions first brought to the fore by the problem of mortmain and the statute that bears its name continue to echo through the corridors of power and the halls of justice, challenging each generation to find its own answers in the ever-evolving dance between tradition and progress. The Statute of Mortmain, a decree of profound consequence, emerged from the depths of royal concern. Kings and barons, their eyes fixed upon the shifting landscape of power, could not idly stand by as vast estates slipped from their grasp. Their coffers, once brimming with the wealth of the realm, began to run dry. Feudal obligations, the very sinews that bound the kingdom together, frayed and weakened with each passing day. Thus spoke King Edward I, his voice resonating through the halls of power. The monarch, known for his iron will and shrewd mind, saw the writing on the wall. The church, ever growing in its influence and holdings, posed a threat to the delicate balance of secular authority. With each donation of land to ecclesiastical bodies, the crown's reach diminished and its ability to govern waned. The king's words fell upon the ears of his advisors, men well versed in the intricacies of statecraft. They nodded in solemn agreement, for they too had witnessed the slow erosion of royal power. The great lords of the realm, once bound by oath and duty to their sovereign, found their loyalties divided. The church, with its promise of salvation and eternal reward, beckoned to those seeking to secure their place in the hereafter. As the sun cast long shadows across the stone floors of Westminster, Edward I paced, his mind awhirl with the implications of this unchecked transfer of land. The very fabric of feudal society, woven through centuries of tradition and custom, threatened to unravel. Something had to be done, and swiftly, lest the crown find itself bereft of the means to rule effectively. The king's counselors, their brows furrowed in concentration, set about drafting a solution. They pored over ancient texts and legal precedents, seeking a way to stem the tide of land flowing into the church's coffers. Days turned to weeks as they labored, their quills scratching ceaselessly upon parchment, until at last, a document began to take shape. This document, which would come to be known as the Statute of Mortmain, was no mere proclamation. It was a carefully crafted legal instrument, designed to preserve the delicate balance between secular and ecclesiastical power. Its provisions were clear and unambiguous, Henceforth, no land could be given to the church without royal license. The implications of this statute were far-reaching. No longer could wealthy nobles simply bequeath their estates to religious institutions, hoping to buy their way into heaven. The crown would now have a say in every such transaction, ensuring that its interests were protected and its authority maintained. As word of the statute spread throughout the realm, reactions were mixed. The church, unsurprisingly, bristled at this curtailment of its ability to acquire land. Bishops and abbots raised their voices in protest, decrying what they saw as an infringement upon their God-given rights. Yet their cries fell upon deaf ears, for the king's resolve was unshakable. The great lords of the realm, for their part, found themselves torn. On one hand, the statute limited their freedom to dispose of their lands as they saw fit. On the other, it offered a measure of protection against the ever-expanding influence of the church. Many saw in it a chance to reassert their own power and importance within the feudal hierarchy. As the dust settled and the full impact of the Statute of Mortmain began to be felt, a new order emerged. The crown, its position strengthened, found itself better able to exert its authority over both secular and religious matters. The flow of land into the dead hand of the church slowed to a trickle, preserving the economic and military resources upon which the feudal system depended. Yet the statute was not without its challenges. Clever lawyers and determined churchmen sought ways to circumvent its provisions, devising elaborate schemes to transfer land without running afoul of the law. The king and his successors would need to remain vigilant, constantly adapting and refining the statute to close loopholes and maintain its effectiveness. As the years passed, the Statute of Mortmain became an integral part of English law, shaping the relationship between church and state for generations to come. Its influence extended far beyond the realm of land ownership, touching upon issues of sovereignty, taxation, and the very nature of power itself. Kings who followed in Edward I's footsteps would look back upon the statute as a turning point, a moment when the crown reasserted its primacy in the face of ecclesiastical encroachment. They would draw upon its precedent as they sought to navigate the treacherous waters of medieval politics, balancing the demands of the nobility against the ambitions of the church. The legacy of the Statute of Mortmain would endure long after the feudal system itself had faded into history. Its principles, rooted in the need to maintain a balance of power and protect the interests of the state, would find echoes in later legal and political developments. From the dissolution of the monasteries under Henry VIII to the reforms of the modern era, the shadow of Edward I's decree would continue to loom large. As we reflect upon this pivotal moment in English history, we are reminded of the complex interplay between secular and religious authority that has shaped our world. The Statute of Mortmain stands as a testament to the foresight and determination of those who sought to preserve the delicate balance of power in medieval society. In the end, it was not merely a law, but a declaration of royal will and a reaffirmation of the crown as central role in the governance of the realm. Its impact would be felt for centuries, a lasting monument to the vision of a king who understood that the strength of a nation lies not in the accumulation of wealth by a few, but in the careful stewardship of resources for the benefit of all. And so, as the sun sets on our exploration of this momentous statute, we are left to ponder the enduring lessons it holds for our own time. In a world where the balance of power is constantly shifting, where new challenges arise with each passing day, perhaps we would do well to remember the wisdom of those who came before us. For in their struggles and triumphs, we may yet find guidance for the challenges that lie ahead. In 1279, a quiet assembly gathered. Parliament convened, and from its deliberations, a law of subtle power emerged. The Statute of Mortmain, as it would come to be known, took shape with deceptive simplicity. Its core decree: lands could no longer pass to the church without royal license. A seemingly modest measure, yet like a pebble cast into still waters, its ripples would grow to reshape the very fabric of English society. The halls of Westminster buzzed with hushed conversations as lords and commons alike debated the merits of this new statute. King Edward I, ever the astute statesman, recognized the delicate balance between church and crown. He saw in this law a means to stem the tide of land slipping from royal control into ecclesiastical hands. For with each acre granted to the church, the crown's power waned, its coffers lighter, its influence diminished. As quills scratched parchment and seals were pressed, few could have foreseen the far-reaching consequences of their actions. The Statute of Mortmain, born in that moment, would echo through centuries, shaping the very foundations of English land law and the relationship between secular and religious powers. The enactment process itself was a study in medieval statecraft. Nobles jostled for position, each seeking to ensure their interests were protected. The church, ever vigilant, sent emissaries to plead their case, arguing for the sanctity of pious gifts and the importance of spiritual endowments. Yet the tide of royal sentiment proved too strong to stem. As debates raged, compromises were struck. The statute, in its final form, allowed for exceptions. The king, in his wisdom, could grant license for land transfers to the church when he deemed it appropriate. This royal prerogative would prove a powerful tool in the years to come, allowing the crown to maintain a degree of control over the flow of land and wealth. The drafting of the statute was a meticulous affair. Legal minds pored over every word, every clause, ensuring that the language was precise yet flexible enough to withstand the test of time. They drew upon centuries of common law tradition, weaving together strands of custom and precedent to create a tapestry of legal innovation. As the final text took shape, a sense of anticipation filled the air. Those present knew they were witnessing a moment of profound significance, though perhaps not fully grasping the extent of its impact. The Statute of Mortmain would go on to influence not just land ownership, but the very nature of property rights in England for generations to come. The formal proclamation of the statute was a solemn affair. Heralds read the text aloud in town squares and marketplaces across the realm. From the bustling streets of London to the quiet villages of the countryside, word spread of this new law that would reshape the landscape of power and piety. Reactions varied widely. Some lauded the king's foresight in protecting the interests of the crown and ensuring a stable base for royal authority. Others, particularly within the church, viewed this statute with alarm, seeing in it a threat to their traditional rights and privileges. Abbots and bishops huddled in worried conference, pondering how best to navigate this new legal terrain. Yet for all the immediate controversy, the true significance of the Statute of Mortmain would only become apparent with the passage of time. Its effects would ripple outward, touching every aspect of English society. The balance of power between church and state, the nature of land ownership, the very concept of perpetual institutions, all would be profoundly shaped by this seemingly simple law. In the years that followed, legal scholars would pore over the statute's text, debating its nuances and implications. Cases would be brought before the courts, testing the boundaries of its application. The concept of mortmain itself, the dead hand, that held property in perpetuity, would become a cornerstone of English legal thought. The statute's impact extended far beyond the realm of law. It reshaped the economic landscape of England, altering patterns of land use and inheritance. Families that had long relied on the church as a repository for younger sons in surplus, daughters now found themselves seeking new avenues for their ambitions. The very fabric of rural society began to shift, as land that might once have passed into ecclesiastical hands remained in secular circulation. For the church, the Statute of Mortmain posed both challenge and opportunity. While it limited the easy acquisition of new lands, it also spurred innovation in fundraising and resource management. Monasteries and cathedrals found new ways to generate income, diversifying their economic activities and becoming more deeply enmeshed in the secular world. The crown, too, felt the statute's effects. The royal prerogative to grant licenses for land transfers became a valuable tool of statecraft, allowing kings to reward loyalty and punish dissent. Yet it also placed a burden on the monarchy, requiring careful management to maintain the delicate balance between secular and religious interests. As decades passed, the Statute of Mortmain became woven into the very fabric of English law and society. Its principles were tested, refined, and reinterpreted, adapting to the changing needs of each generation. What had begun as a simple measure to protect royal interests had grown into a fundamental pillar of the English legal system. The ripples of that quiet law, enacted in 1279, continued to spread. They touched the lives of peasants and princes alike, reshaping the contours of power and property across the realm. The Statute of Mortmain stood as a testament to the profound impact that seemingly small legal changes could have on the course of history. In the centuries that followed, as England evolved and transformed, the principles enshrined in the Statute of Mortmain remained a constant presence. They influenced the development of trust law, shaped debates on charitable giving, and played a role in the great religious upheavals of the Reformation. The dead hand of the past, ironically, proved to be a living force in shaping the future. And so, from that moment in 1279 when Parliament assembled and a quiet law took shape, the Statute of Mortmain began its long journey through history. Like a pebble cast into still waters, its ripples grew, touching shores far beyond the imagining of those who first set it in motion. In its subtle power and far-reaching consequences, it stands as a testament to the enduring impact of law on the shaping of society. The Statute of Mortmain cast a long shadow over the land, its effects rippling through the fabric of everyday life. In villages and hamlets across the realm, change crept in like a morning mist, subtle yet pervasive. Abbeys and monasteries, once secure in their vast holdings, now found themselves scrambling to adapt to this new reality. Some religious houses, quick to perceive the shifting tides, sought to license their smaller, more productive fields. These gifted plots, once freely bestowed upon them by pious benefactors, now required royal approval to retain. The abbots and priors, with quills in hand and worry etched upon their brows, penned earnest petitions to the crown, hoping to secure their cherished lands. Others, perhaps more pragmatic or less willing to risk royal displeasure, entered into negotiations with local lords and freeholders. These discussions, often tense and fraught with centuries of accumulated privilege and resentment, unfolded in hushed tones within stone-walled chambers. The goal was clear: to find a way to maintain their influence and income while adhering to the letter, if not always the spirit, of the new law. Yet for some abbeys, the writing was on the wall. With heavy hearts and much soul-searching, they began the painful process of relinquishing lands they had held for generations. Fields that had known the touch of monastic plows for centuries now passed into secular hands, a tangible symbol of the changing times. As the great ecclesiastical estates began to fracture and shift, unexpected opportunities arose for the common folk. Peasant families, long accustomed to tilling the soil for others, found small cracks opening in the rigid structure of feudal land ownership. A fortunate few managed to acquire modest plots, transforming overnight from landless laborers to proud, if humble, landowners. These changes, momentous as they were, unfolded against the backdrop of life's eternal rhythms. The bells still tolled for daily prayer, calling monks and villagers alike to pause in their labors and lift their thoughts heavenward. The fields still demanded their due, the crops ripening under the summer sun, heedless of legal statutes or royal decrees. And through it all, the cycle of feasts and fasts continued unabated. Village greens still echoed with laughter and music on holy days, the aroma of roasting meat and fresh-baked bread, a reminder that, statute or no statute, life must be celebrated. Yet beneath this veneer of continuity, subtle shifts were taking place. The village priest, once perhaps a distant figure associated more with the great abbey than the local flock, now found himself drawn closer to his parishioners. With the abbey's influence waning, these local clerics stepped into the breach, becoming more integral to the daily lives and spiritual well-being of their communities. In the fields, new patterns of cultivation began to emerge. Lands once managed with an eye towards supporting monastic life now saw crops rotated with an eye towards market demand. Sheep, always a mainstay of the English countryside, multiplied on pastures that had once grown wheat for abbey bread. The very landscape itself began to change, albeit slowly. Here and there, new hedgerows appeared, marking the boundaries of freshly divided fields. Small cottages sprang up on plots of land now held by yeoman farmers, their thatched roofs a testament to newfound independence and prosperity. In the village tavern, tongues loosened by ale spoke of these changes with a mixture of wonder and wariness. Old men reminisced about the days when the abbey's word was law, while younger voices dared to dream of a future where a man might own the land he worked. Women, gathering at the village well, exchanged whispered hopes of better prospects for their children in this new world. Yet for all these changes, much remained the same. The great wheel of the seasons turned as it always had, bringing with it the eternal cycle of planting and harvest. The village church still stood at the heart of the community, its spire a constant reminder of higher things amidst the earthly concerns of daily life. Children still played in the dusty streets, their laughter a counterpoint to the bleating of sheep and the distant clanging of the blacksmith's hammer. The smell of fresh-baked bread still wafted from cottage windows, a homely aroma unchanged by royal statutes or legal wrangling. As autumn approached, bringing with it the promise of harvest, the full impact of the Statute of Mortmain began to make itself felt. The great barns of the abbeys, once bursting with tithes and rents, now stood half empty. Yet in their place, smaller storehouses rose on newly acquired lands, filled with the fruits of independent labor. The harvest itself became a symbol of the changing times. Where once the abbot's representatives had overseen the gathering of crops, now local landowners and yeoman farmers directed operations on their own plots. The sense of communal effort remained, but it was tinged with a new spirit of individual enterprise. As the last sheaves were brought in and the harvest moon rose over the stubbled fields, the village gathered for the traditional feast. The tables groaned under the weight of food and drink, much as they always had. Yet keen observers might have noticed subtle differences. Here, a dish prepared with spices once too costly for common folk. There, a finer quality of ale, brewed by a newly prosperous farmer. In the flickering light of the bonfire, old and young alike danced and made merry. The music and laughter echoed across the fields, a joyous affirmation that, despite the changes wrought by distant laws and decrees, the heart of village life beat on, strong and true. As the night wore on and the celebrations began to wind down, conversations turned once more to the future. What would the coming years bring? How would the village and its people continue to adapt to this new reality? No one could say for certain. But as the first light of dawn began to paint the eastern sky, one thing was clear. Life in the village, for all its changes, would go on. The daily round of prayer and work, of joy and sorrow, would continue. And in that continuity, perhaps, lay the true strength of the English countryside. A resilience born of centuries of tradition, yet ever adaptable to the winds of change. The Statute of Mortmain, a medieval legal cornerstone, underwent significant refinements in the centuries following its inception. As time marched on, the law's grip tightened, its reach extended, and its implications deepened. License fees emerged, a bureaucratic dance of permissions and payments. Overseers materialized, watchful eyes ensuring compliance with the ever-evolving statute. Court visits became a regular affair, as disputes and interpretations demanded judicial scrutiny. Yet, as the sands of time shifted, the echoes of this ancient legislation persisted. Universities, bastions of knowledge and progress, found themselves entangled in the web of property laws spun from this medieval tweak. Their expansions, their endowments, all subject to the long shadow cast by Mortmain. Charities, too, navigated these treacherous waters, their noble intentions often at odds with the rigid framework born centuries prior. The amendments came in waves, each leaving its mark on the statute's evolving form. Parliament, in its wisdom, sought to address the changing needs of a nation in flux. The Church, once the primary target of the law, found itself joined by an array of institutions grappling with its constraints. Corporations, guilds, and fraternities all felt the weight of Mortmain's legacy. License fees, once a simple concept, grew into a complex system of financial obligations. The Crown, ever mindful of its coffers, saw an opportunity to extract revenue from those seeking to circumvent the statute's restrictions. These fees, a deterrent to some and a mere inconvenience to others, became a hallmark of the Mortmain landscape. Overseers, appointed to ensure compliance, wielded considerable influence. Their role, at first glance administrative, carried profound implications for those under their purview. These guardians of the statute's intent walked a fine line between enforcement and interpretation, their decisions shaping the practical application of the law. Court visits, once rare occurrences, became commonplace as the statute's reach expanded. Judges, tasked with unraveling the intricacies of Mortmain, found themselves at the center of heated debates. Their rulings, carefully crafted and meticulously argued, set precedents that would echo through the ages. As the centuries rolled by, the Statute of Mortmain's influence seeped into unexpected corners of society. Universities, those hallowed halls of learning, discovered that their very foundations were intertwined with this medieval legislation. Expansion plans, carefully laid and eagerly anticipated, often ran afoul of property laws rooted in Mortmain's principles. Endowments, the lifeblood of academic institutions, faced scrutiny under the statute's watchful gaze. Benefactors, their generosity tempered by legal constraints, sought creative ways to support their chosen seats of learning. The dance between philanthropy and compliance became an art form, with lawyers and administrators as its reluctant choreographers. Charities, too, found themselves caught in Mortmain's web. Their noble missions, aimed at alleviating society's ills, often clashed with the rigid framework established centuries before. Land acquisitions, vital for expanding their reach and impact, became minefields of legal complexity. The very laws designed to prevent the accumulation of wealth in dead hands now threatened to strangle the life-giving work of these benevolent organizations. The legacy of Mortmain extended far beyond its original scope, touching aspects of society its medieval architects could scarcely have imagined. Property laws, once a simple matter of ownership and transfer, now carried the weight of centuries of interpretation and amendment. The seemingly straightforward act of acquiring land became a journey through a labyrinth of legal precedents and statutory requirements. As the modern era dawned, the echoes of Mortmain still reverberated through the halls of power and the corridors of academia. Lawmakers grappled with the challenge of reconciling medieval principles with the needs of a rapidly evolving society. The tension between preserving historical legal traditions and adapting to contemporary realities became a constant theme in discussions of property law. Universities, those bastions of innovation and progress, found themselves paradoxically bound by ancient statutes. Their efforts to expand, to build new facilities, and create cutting-edge research centers often collided with the remnants of Mortmain's restrictions. Legal teams became as crucial to campus planning as architects and educators. Their expertise needed to navigate the complex interplay between modern ambitions and historical constraints. Charities, driven by the noblest of intentions, faced similar hurdles. Their missions, often requiring significant land holdings to house the vulnerable or protect natural habitats, ran headlong into the echoes of medieval legislation. The irony was not lost on those who sought to do good. only to find their efforts hampered by laws originally intended to prevent the concentration of wealth and power. The statute's legacy extended beyond mere legal considerations, seeping into the very fabric of institutional planning and strategy. Long-term visions for growth and development had to be tempered with a keen awareness of Mortmain's lingering influence. What might have been straightforward acquisitions or donations in other contexts became complex legal maneuvers, requiring careful navigation of centuries-old statutes and their modern interpretations. As society continued to evolve, calls for reform grew louder. The incongruity of applying medieval concepts to 21st century challenges became increasingly apparent. Yet, the tenacity of legal tradition and the complexities of wholesale reform meant that change came slowly, if at all. The Statute of Mortmain, though modified and reinterpreted over the centuries, remained a stubborn presence in the landscape of property law. The echoes of this medieval tweak continued to resonate, a reminder of the enduring power of legal precedent. Universities and charities, along with a host of other institutions, found themselves forever navigating the complex waters of property law, their course still influenced by the ripples of a statute enacted in a world far removed from their own. In the end, the Statute of Mortmain stood as a testament to the long reach of history, its influence extending far beyond its original intent and era. What began as a targeted measure to curb the power of the Church had evolved into a complex web of legal considerations affecting a broad swath of society. The statute's legacy served as a poignant reminder that the past is never truly past, its echoes shaping the present and future in ways both subtle and profound. As the dust settles on the parchment of history, we find ourselves gazing upon the Statute of Mortmain, a quiet sentinel of change in the tapestry of medieval life. It stands not as a thunderous proclamation, but as a gentle whisper, a soft breeze that rustles through the leaves of time, reshaping the landscape of property and power with the subtlety of a master gardener. In the twilight of our journey through this ancient law, we pause to reflect on the nature of quiet change. The Statute of Mortmain, like a pebble cast into a still pond, sent ripples across the surface of medieval society. Its effects felt far beyond the initial splash. It did not arrive with the fanfare of a royal decree or the clamor of battle, but rather with the steady, persistent force of legal evolution. Consider, if you will, the way this statute wove itself into the fabric of daily life. It did not demand immediate, drastic upheaval, but instead encouraged a gradual shift in the way land and wealth were distributed. Like a skilled weaver working with threads of law and custom, it slowly altered the pattern of land ownership, creating a new tapestry of social and economic relationships. The beauty of such quiet change lies in its ability to take root without resistance. It is the difference between a sapling forced into unyielding soil and one that grows naturally, its roots spreading deep and wide over time. The Statute of Mortmain was this sapling, planted in the fertile ground of medieval law, nurtured by the needs of a changing society. As we contemplate its impact, we must appreciate the delicate balance it struck. It did not seek to topple the great institutions of the Church or nobility, but rather to guide them towards a more sustainable coexistence with the Crown and Commons. It was a law that spoke in whispers, not shouts, persuading rather than commanding. In this gentle pressure, we find a lesson for our own times. Change need not always come with the crash of revolution or the roar of reform. Sometimes the most enduring transformations are those that come softly, almost imperceptibly, until one day we look up and realize the world around us has shifted. The Statute of Mortmain reminds us that the pen can indeed be mightier than the sword, especially when wielded with patience and foresight. It demonstrates how legal frameworks can shape society not through force, but through the slow, steady accumulation of small adjustments and reinterpretations. As we draw our exploration to a close, let us ponder the legacy of this unassuming statute. Its influence extended far beyond its immediate context, touching upon the very foundations of property law and the relationship between church and state. Yet, it achieved this not through grand gestures or sweeping edicts, but through the patient application of legal principles. In the grand narrative of history, the Statute of Mortmain may not occupy center stage. It does not have the drama of a Magna Carta or the revolutionary fervor of later constitutional documents. But in its quiet way, it was no less transformative. It reminds us that history is not always made in moments of high drama, but often in the steady, unremarkable passage of days and years. The statute's enduring impact lies not just in its specific provisions, but in the precedent it set for the power of law to shape society. It demonstrated that legal instruments could be used not just to maintain the status quo, but to guide society towards new horizons, however distant they might seem. As we reflect on this medieval statute, we are reminded of the power of incremental change. Each small adjustment, each subtle shift in policy or practice, can contribute to a larger transformation. The Statute of Mortmain did not seek to remake the world overnight, but to plant seeds that would grow and flourish over generations. In our modern world, where we often crave instant results and dramatic solutions, the lesson of the Statute of Mortmain is particularly poignant. It teaches us the value of patience, of setting in motion processes that may not bear fruit in our own lifetimes, but which can shape the world for those who come after us. The statute also stands as a testament to the enduring power of ideas. Though its specific provisions may have faded into legal history, the principles it embodied, the balance of power, the regulation of wealth, the relationship between secular and religious authorities, continue to resonate in our contemporary discussions of governance and society. As we conclude our reflection, let us carry forward the spirit of the Statute of Mortmain. Let us remember that change need not always announce itself with fanfare, that progress can come through steady, thoughtful action rather than dramatic upheaval. In our own lives and in our societies, we too can be agents of quiet change, setting in motion ripples that may, in time, reshape the world around us. In the end, the Statute of Mortmain stands not just as a historical curiosity, but as a symbol of the power of law to guide society forward. It reminds us that even in the midst of turbulent times, there is always room for measured, thoughtful progress. It encourages us to look beyond the immediate horizon, to plant seeds of change that may not bloom in our lifetime, but which will bear fruit for generations to come. And so, as we turn the page on this chapter of history, we carry with us the gentle wisdom of the Statute of Mortmain. It whispers to us across the centuries, reminding us that the most profound changes often come not with a bang, but with a whisper, not through force, but through the patient application of principle and reason. In our own lives, in our communities, and in our world, may we too be agents of quiet change. May we have the wisdom to see beyond the immediate, the patience to nurture long-term transformation, and the courage to set in motion the subtle shifts that can, over time, reshape our world for the better. As we close this reflection, let us carry forward the spirit of the Statute of Mortmain, a spirit of quiet progress, of gentle but persistent change, of laws that shape society not through command, but through guidance and persuasion. In this way, we honor not just a piece of medieval legislation, but the enduring power of thoughtful, measured action to create a better world. And so, the Statute of Mortmain stands as a whisper of order in medieval life. Small law, gentle pressures, subtle shifts, not heralded by trumpets, but carried forward by peaceful legal breath. As we draw our journey through medieval legal history to a close, let your mind wander back to those ancient halls of power. Picture the flickering candlelight illuminating the faces of nobles and clergy, their quills scratching across parchment as they debate the intricacies of land ownership and royal prerogative. The Statute of Mortmain, a pivotal moment in the struggle between church and state, echoes through the centuries, its impact still felt in the laws that shape our world today. Imagine the bustling streets of 13th century London, the air thick with the scent of wood smoke and spices. In the shadow of Westminster Abbey, King Edward I and his advisors gather to address a growing concern: the ever-expanding wealth and influence of the Church. The land, lifeblood of feudal society, is slipping away from royal control, piece by piece, as pious nobles bequeath their estates to religious institutions. Close your eyes and envision the great stone halls where this momentous statute was crafted. Feel the weight of history in the air, the tension between secular and spiritual authority that has shaped the course of nations. The Statute of Mortmain, literally dead hand in Old French, seeks to stem the tide of land passing into the unchanging grip of the Church, forever beyond the reach of taxation and feudal obligations. As you drift deeper into this medieval world, consider the far-reaching consequences of this seemingly simple law. Monasteries and abbeys, once expanding their holdings unchecked, now face new obstacles in their quest for earthly wealth. The balance of power shifts, ever so slightly, back towards the crown and its noble supporters. But the story doesn't end there. Like ripples in a pond, the effects of the Statute of Mortmain spread outward through time. Picture the legal scholars of subsequent centuries, poring over dusty tomes, debating the finer points of this landmark legislation. Its principles echo through the ages, influencing property law, charitable giving, and the delicate dance between church and state, long after the medieval world has faded into memory. In your mind's eye, fast forward to the dissolution of the monasteries under Henry VIII, a cataclysmic event with roots stretching back to Edward's statute. See the great abbeys, once bastions of learning and spiritual devotion, standing empty and broken. The land, long held in the dead hand of the Church, now flows back into secular hands, reshaping the very landscape of England. As we prepare to bid farewell to this chapter of history, take a moment to reflect on the enduring legacy of the Statute of Mortmain. Its impact reaches far beyond the confines of medieval England, touching on fundamental questions of ownership, legacy, and the proper role of institutions in society. These are debates that continue to resonate in our modern world, even as the specific circumstances that gave rise to the statute have long since passed into history. Breathe deeply and let the weight of centuries settle around you. Feel the connection to those long-ago lawmakers, grappling with issues that, in many ways, still challenge us today. The Statute of Mortmain stands as a testament to the complex interplay between law, religion, and politics, a dance that has shaped the course of nations and the lives of countless individuals throughout history. As we come to the end of our exploration, allow your thoughts to linger on the enduring power of ideas. The principles enshrined in this ancient statute, the need to balance competing interests, to safeguard the rights of both individuals and institutions, to adapt to changing social and economic realities, continue to inform our legal and political discourse. In studying the past, we gain invaluable insights into the challenges and opportunities of the present and future. Take a moment to appreciate the vast tapestry of history, woven from countless threads of human ambition, conflict, and cooperation. The Statute of Mortmain is but one small part of this grand narrative, yet its influence reverberates through the centuries, a reminder of the profound impact that seemingly arcane legal documents can have on the shape of society. As we prepare to leave this medieval world behind, carry with you the lessons of the Statute of Mortmain. Let them serve as a reminder of the enduring relevance of history, the complex interplay between different spheres of human activity, and the power of law to shape the world around us. In these final moments, allow your mind to drift once more through cloistered halls and sunlit fields. Feel the rough texture of parchment beneath your fingers. Hear the distant chanting of monks. Smell the earthy aroma of freshly tilled soil. The Statute of Mortmain, born in this world so different from our own, continues to whisper its lessons across the ages. As we conclude our journey, take comfort in the knowledge that you now carry a small piece of this rich history within you. The struggles and triumphs of those long-ago lawmakers and the society they sought to shape have become a part of your own story, a thread connecting you to the vast tapestry of human experience. Let the echoes of the past fade gently away, carrying with them the weight of centuries. As you return to the present, may you do so with a deeper appreciation for the complex forces that have shaped our world, and a renewed sense of connection to those who came before us. Thank you for sharing this quiet moment with history. Good night.